your steps. Not some obscure person, but the very God of very gods that has been manifested in flesh. From this perspective, Paul gets into Hebrews chapter 2, and he says, therefore, whenever you're studying the Word of God, every word has a meaning to it. And sometimes we can read over things and try to pull out what we want to pull out, but you have to slow down and look at a word and say, why does he use the therefore? And therefore is a word that points backwards to something. It points back to a previous chapter. And he's trying to instill in us and in our minds the understanding of the fact that Jesus Christ has the right to speak into your life. He's the one that laid the foundation of the world. He's the one that created all things, and he has the right to speak into your life. Not only does he have the right to speak in your life, but because he is the beginning and the end, he knows more than you can imagine that he knows, and therefore, because of who we're dealing with, it's not going to be long. I'm taking my time. I'm not going to be long. It's going to be over real quick. But I want to say to you, what God's saying to me is that we are taking God way too lightly. Jesus said to tell you, therefore, because of who I am, you ought to give the more earnest heed to the things that you are hearing being preached every week. Whether it's over this pulpit, whether it's over a pulpit in another state or in another country, the Word of God is going forth and being declared. And the Word that's being declared now is different than the Word that was being declared back in the Old Testament. The Word that's being declared now is being spoken clearly by Jesus Christ himself. Some of you, even this week, God has talked to you. You've asked for direction and God has told you what to do. You've asked for help and God has showed up and given you help. Some of you, God has consistently been talking to you about issues in your life, but you are not taking earnest heed. What are you talking about? The concept of earnest heed is showing sincere and intense conviction or a serious behavior toward God. Back in the day, we used to call it playing church. People go to church, they hear the word preached, they go home and act exactly the same way they were when they came to church. There's no change. There's no change in attitude, no change in behavior, no change in their language or conversation, no change, and consequently, guess what? Their life remains in the same place. There's no growth. There's no fruit. Been in church 5 years, still angry. Been in church 10 years, still sinning. Still cussing, still drinking, still fornicating. 10 years in the ministry. And it's not because you're not able to change. It's because we're not taking, someone say, earnest heed. Earnest heed. That means we have to seriously, with intention, listen to what God is saying. I'm only asking you for two things this morning. I'm asking you to listen, and I'm asking you to pay attention. Pay attention to what God is trying to say to you this morning. It is from this thought that we move into Mark chapter 4. That people are trying to grow in their walk with God and can't figure out why I'm not growing. It doesn't really matter how long you've been saved, there's always room for growth. Even myself, you know, those that are close to me can attest to the fact that I'm constantly trying to learn, I'm constantly trying to study, I'm constantly trying to change. Change the way I teach, change the way I preach, change the way I deal with people, change the way I respond to the way people respond to me. See, when I first started pastoring, I was a real kind of hardcore male chauvinist because I was raised that way. My bishop, which is her pastor, was that way. And so when I started pastoring, first of all, no one could tell me nothing. I went, hardly listen, I'm the pastor. And secondly, women just need to sit down and be quiet. And that's the way I was raised. But as I begin to grow in God, someone say grow. Grow. The Lord will show you things about Him that's different than things about you. And the whole idea of being saved is that what? God says, I want to change you into the image of my dear Son. Coming to church and just being who you are and say, this is the way I've always been, it's not really acceptable with God, because God saved you so you wouldn't be who you've always been. What would it be like if I was just like I've always been? Getting high, spending about $700 a day on cocaine. That means I'd be stealing your money, breaking in your car when you were, back there in the fellowship hall. Going out there, they left the door and like, look at that purse right there. What would it be like if I said I was always like this and I don't want to change? I would be a miserable pastor. But because I understand that the Word of God comes to bring change and to cause us to grow so that we can live at a level above what we're normally used and accustomed to living because of the power of God. Jesus begins to teach him. He says, the sower went forth to sow some seed. And this story has always enticed me. I've loved this story because it has so many principles within it. You can preach it, teach it upside down, backwards, sideways. And there's always something more you can get out of it. And this morning God said, listen, people need to understand what it really takes to grow. How many people want to grow? How many people are not just really not satisfied? Just staying right where you are. I don't care if you've been saved 25 years. I've been saved 25 years, I'm fine. Listen. Paul said, I have not yet obtained. Wrote mostly all the epistles. Peter said like this about Paul. He said he had revelation so deep that some of the stuff we couldn't even understand. And yet this man, who was caught up in the third heavens, said, I'm not completely all there yet. And that I got to keep myself under, because after I preach to you, I myself don't want to be a castaway. I got to make sure that I change my attitude. Oh yeah, you get some revelation, you can get so deep that you start getting an attitude about being so smart. You ever really smart people that, they act smart? You don't know what I'm talking about. You give them a word, but they give you like the bigger word. Like, just speak English, please, come on. That is English. And no matter what you say, they always got to say something bigger. Yeah, I went to Europe and I went hang gliding. That's all right, I went to the moon. All right, I can see right now I won't win this battle. But Jesus begins to talk about a principle and a concept I think that's valuable to us, for us to understand what happens with people. He says the sower went out to sow some seed, and he said, and the first group of folk, the word that was sown, when they heard it, Satan came right away and immediately took it away. And I said the reason why he was able to do that because they weren't listening. And they wasn't paying attention. That's why I said those are the two fundamental things that need to take place in the house of God. When a person comes, you must pay attention to what God is saying. Because what he is saying is what's going to prosper you. Satanic powers do not want you to receive the Word of God. They are going to do everything to try to avert your attention so that you can't hear what the Word or what the Spirit is saying to you. And so he comes right away and he deals with people that are sleeping in church, people that are talking in church, people that are nonchalant, people that are looking off in the sky, folks that are doing this and doing that, and, you know, just fidgeting around, and so then they aren't able to really get what God has for them, so they can't grow. Look at your neighbor, tell him, I want to grow.
I want to grow.
Then he goes on and he says in verse 16,